right, welcome to the Tom and Dave Show. I think we're at like episode 7/11 now, depending on what the part delineation is on our channels. We have a very special guest today, Jacob Kniffen. We are talking some Thunder, a team that's probably not going to get too much time on a lot of airwaves, but a team that I would recommend watching at least a few games of this year if you're not a fan. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you guys?
Fantastic. We both caught that game last night that they were playing. A lot closer than we were expecting. A lot more Lou Dort points than we were expecting. I think we both left it feeling a lot better about the team that they've got out there than we went into it.
Yeah, definitely. In game 7 of the Thunder versus Houston series down in the bubble,
Yep.
Lou Dort snapped, went for 30 points. And there's a lot of people who either cover the Thunder or are fans of the Thunder who thought, did we just see this kid's career high in his first NBA season? Is he ever going to score 30 points again?
Yeah.
Last night, against the Utah Jazz, gets up to 26 and nearly had it again. And, the jumper looks a little bit cleaner. He looks a lot more comfortable going off the bounce and getting to the rim. The lockdown defense is still there. I tweeted early on in that game, about 3 minutes in, I said, you got to imagine Donovan Mitchell's just thinking like, what the hell? Why are you doing this to me 3 minutes into this game? Lou Dort had an absolutely incredible game. And, it's a small sample size. We're only 2 games into the season, but I'm excited to see if this trend of him being able to still be the lockdown defender he is while adding more to his offensive game, if that trend can keep up, or if this is just a flash in the pan moment.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing also, I was texting Dave about it last night or this morning during the game, and he was like, well, maybe you can't bet on a Lou Dort game every night going for 30. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why can't you? And like half kidding, but then Dave was like, yeah, what he was doing on offense actually didn't seem like all of that unsustainable. Like it was a lot of spot up looks. He was looking comfortable driving. Like there's tools there that he can work with.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when he gets downhill, his biggest asset defensively is just his body. The dude is built like an NFL linebacker.
Oh yeah.
He's learning how to use that body now offensively, drive downhill, bump people out of the way on the drive. He's got a nice little head fake that for some reason everybody bites on, which I haven't quite figured that part out yet. But he did a really good job getting downhill last night. He's added this little Euro step that he's used a few times now, which for a man that big to be that light on his feet and be able to Euro step like defies physics.
Oh yeah.
But he's been a revelation. I think a lot of Thunder fans were really excited about him coming into this season. You got to remember, this kid is undrafted, right?
Yeah.
Undrafted, started this season last year on a 2-way, got the call up. His first 3 games on being called up with the Thunder, he had to guard Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, and then De'Aaron Fox. And it's like, man, this is your welcome to the NBA moment for sure. And he saw that opportunity, he seized it, and he's never looked back since. And it's exciting, especially knowing that the Thunder have, after this season, have this kid locked up for 3 more years. The most expensive year is $1.8 million. I mean, he's making nothing.
It feels like exactly the player you want to be finding at this stage in like the development of what the Thunder are right now. Also just feels like a really easy player to root for, like a guy that kind of came out of nowhere but surprised everybody.
Definitely. I feel like Lou gets a lot of love around the league just because he's easy to root for, right? He's this guy who works his ass off every game. He defends like crazy. You can just see out there that he puts it all on the line. I mean, I think NBA fans really became endeared with him during that Rockets series when you just saw him put the absolute clamps on James Harden for,
Oh yeah.
what was it, 5 straight games,
Yeah, he was giving him fits.
Yeah, and I think that sort of transitions into one thing I'd really noticed about this team last night, which was in that starting lineup. I feel like along with Dort, now Darius Baisley, I'm not like super well versed in, so maybe you can help us out on him. But you have 4, maybe 5 really, really adequate to great NBA defenders. Shai has the length and the quickness. Dort, we were just talking about. George Hill and Horford are, consummate vets who are just not going to make stupid decisions and, misread things or anything. Um, and that sort of made Tom and I think that maybe this Thunder team actually could end up winning a few more games than everyone's expecting them to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think their over under the last I checked was like at 21 or 22 and a half games for the season.
Mm.
2 games in, they're 2 inches of a Shea layup away from being 2-0 right now,
Mm.
right? One win, the first win against Charlotte, which I know Charlotte's trying to compete, but it's no offense to Charlotte fans, it's Charlotte, right? Like they don't look good.
Mhm.
But Utah wants to be like a top tier Western Conference playoff team that the Thunder just took them, down to the wire last night. Like you mentioned, the starting lineup, incredibly competent. Like, I don't know if I'm putting them in like the top half of the league starting lineup, but defensively they're good. They move the ball well under new coach Mark Dagnall. That starting lineup is really, really good, and almost to the detriment of the front office, who this offseason, in the very shortened offseason, made, I think, more trades than any other team in an offseason in league history to just completely tear this team down to the studs, to start a rebuild, to tank, to get high draft picks, plus the million other draft picks they have from other teams. And as of right now, they don't look like a team that's going to be a bottom 3 team in the league. Now, is there moves to be made this season? We'll see. They could definitely strip this down even further and really get it down to where it's just a whole bunch of 22 and 23-year-old kids playing basketball. But as of right now, like, this team looks like, now the bench has some work, right? The bench is like one of the worst benches in the league, just because there's so much inexperience there. But this is a team that looks like they're on pace to already beat their over under with just the way they compete and the way they play. Again, small sample size, right? They've only played 2 games, should be 3, but James Harden was too busy at the strip club, so they didn't get to play that first OKC versus Houston game. But it looking like a team that is maybe a little too competent to tank.
It is. It's funny. I feel like their starting lineup is good enough to get their bench into position to just blow it in a lot of these games.
Yeah,
Like, there will be close losses.
definitely. And I think last night, as far as I think maybe the front office is concerned, last night is maybe about the perfect setup for a game you can have. Your young guys are competing. They're showing flashes of growth. You're seeing, Shai is now averaging like 8 assists over the past 2 games, 24 points, 5 rebounds. Lou's going off. Baisley looks incredibly comfortable. So you're seeing your young guys play well. They're competing. It's a close game that you lose at the end, and each loss just betters your lottery odds.
Oh yeah,
It's like the perfect storm for a tanking team.
yeah. Like, that's the ideal Thunder game in 2020.
It definitely is. It definitely is. Last night I had tweeted at the end of the game and I said, either A, we're getting a game winner again, or B, we're bettering the lottery odds by losing. Like, you can't ask for a better outcome than that for a team
Oh yeah,
that wants to bottom out and get a top 5 pick this year.
yeah. Like, I think the line Dave and I used in our season preview was like, there's a world where the Thunder don't completely suck this year, just because, like, there's talent here. Like, I don't know. You see Al Horford looking incredibly spry for a guy who last year I feel like we thought was done. You got George Hill coming off, like, as Dave said, consummate vet. They're going to be in a lot of these.
Yeah, those 2 vets do look really good, and I think, the Al Horford situation is setting up to be so much like the Chris Paul situation from last year. He comes in, is seen as an albatross contract that's untradeable.
Mm-hmm.
He plays for the Thunder for a season, rebuilds his value across the league, and then in the offseason gets dealt for an asset. And I think that is the Thunder's plan moving forward with Al Horford. Just take the Chris Paul plan that they had last year, copy and paste, and run it through again.
He's even got that, like, similar, I feel like, extension of a coach label that I feel like we apply a lot with, like, Chris Paul and Al Horford, where it's like, oh yeah, he's a smart guy to have out there. He's going to help a lot of these young dudes around.
Definitely.
But yeah, no, it's funny because we were also looking at this team and they lost, what was it, like 5 of their top 7 minutes guys from last year? I mean, Gallo's gone, Chris Paul's gone, Schroeder's gone. Like, it's kind of cool seeing a team that's building all that back up, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting as somebody who's covered this team for years now. This is, by far the biggest turnover, like you mentioned, Chris Paul, Danilo Gallinari, Steven Adams, Dennis Schroeder, really all their guys that were their top rebounders, their top assisters, their top scorers, their top minute getters, besides Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all gone. And so it kind of forces some of those young guys to step up. And the coach and the GM said as much in their preseason media availability that not only are these kids getting an opportunity to take on an extended role on the court, but now they're also getting the opportunity to step up and be leaders, right? Where even though if you think like Shea or Baisley or whoever can be a good leader, when you have Chris Paul around, who in my opinion is one of the best leaders in maybe NBA history, there's not a void there to fill, right? Chris is going to be the leader and everyone defaults to Chris. But now that he's gone, it creates that vacuum where other guys have to step in. I think guys like George Hill have stepped up, Al Horford. But you hear a lot about the leadership of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who Chris took under his wing last year and really molded him, not only on court, but off court as well, on how to be a man, how to be an NBA player, how to be a professional, and how to be a leader. And I think you're going to start to see those dividends pay off this season as your third-year point guard is now kind of becoming not only the face of the franchise as far as points, rebounds, assists, and the statistics and the counting stats, but as the guy that rallies the team, as the guy people look to, which is pretty exciting to see. Even though they lost all these guys, it's like that culture that exists in Oklahoma City has built up these young guys to assume those roles moving forward.
Oh yeah, it's very exciting to see those young guys getting that kind of opportunity. It's I kind of remember something similar being said about the Miami Dolphins last year, actually, where it was like, all right, they stripped this down to the studs basically, but you're giving a lot of guys opportunity where they might not have gotten it elsewhere. Like even if it's, I don't know, whether it's Basley, whether it's Shea, or even somebody like a Hammy or a Poku, who's just like, yeah, we'll take a swing, see what we got here. Like these are the shots you can afford to take, I feel like, as a team that's got so many assets coming down the pipe later.
Yeah, 100%. And that's another thing you mentioned. Poku, Alexei Pokusevsky, the youngest player in the league. Currently, he's in the rotation. He's playing over guys like Darius Miller, Justin Jackson, etc., which is exciting to see. Again, they know the state of their team. They know what they have coming down in the future. And right now it's all about getting young guys reps, getting them experience and getting them comfortable. And so you've seen Poku play like 20 minutes a game. You're seeing point guard Théo Maledon from France getting like 20 minutes a game. And letting those guys get that experience where if Poku was on Denver or on Dallas, he's not getting those opportunities to go out there and play 20 minutes a game. He's probably relegated to the G League, which is essentially what he played over in Europe, was G League ball. So letting him get that opportunity to play with the big club over here and get those reps, I think are only going to pay off in the coming years. And I don't think Poku's a guy that I expect to do a whole lot in his first season.
Yeah.
But the minutes he's getting now, you're going to see that start to pay off in year 2, year 3.
Oh yeah. I mean, even you talk about him being so young. Like I'm a Knicks fan. We had Kevin Knox come in at he was barely 19 when he got drafted. That very young player not getting the opportunity to figure it out as much is a real possibility. So it's good that he's getting those reps now and getting the chance to try and figure it out on the court. Because there are a lot of teams that bring guys like this in and don't understand the trajectory that he might have to take.
Exactly. I was on the local radio station this morning talking about this. This is going to sound blasphemous. So I hope none of your listeners come at me with pitchforks and torches and try to kill me. But Poku being young, super lengthy, scrawny, with a very interesting skill set that just needs time to develop in the league, really matches what Giannis was, does it not?
Mhm. No, I mean,
Young, European, long, a little bit scrawny, interesting skill set. I'm not saying Poku's going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo and went back-to-back MVPs and MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year, anything like that. But I'm just saying that the trajectory, the starting points really
Mhm.
match up.
no,
And
definitely.
interestingly enough, Woj had mentioned on his Giannis podcast special, the Thunder were poised to draft Giannis in that draft, but they wanted to stash him overseas for another year rather than bring him over. And Giannis didn't want to do that. He and his representation said, "No, we want to come over to the league now." And so that changed. But the Thunder have kind of an eye for this type of player. It seems like.
Oh yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, it is a very similar profile. Also, I'm glad that we brought a Giannis and Poku same sentence in here, because this is the kind of thing we're gonna put out there on social and just grab.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. Bring him on.
Yeah, this is
Jacob said Poku equals Giannis. I'm ready for it. I'm
Um,
on the record.
Speaking of Poku and these guys, like as someone who's very well versed in this team and these young guys, who do you think are those other long-term pieces next to SGA that you would think the Thunder are kind of prioritizing their development?
For sure. So I think Shai is obviously number one. He's the guy that they really want to put the ball in his hands and really experiment with him and see what he can be in the league, right? Because his first 2 years in the league, he's been on veteran-laden teams where he just kind of existed on the peripherals. Last year, he scored a lot, but he didn't handle the ball much because he played with two other point guards. So I think they really want to see what Shai has, but he's obviously a building block. I think the second building block is probably Darius Baisley. I think the team is very high on Darius Baisley. He's, fascinating story. He skipped out on college, was originally committed to go to Syracuse, skipped out on college to take $1 million internship with New Balance, trained on his own, signed with Clutch Sports, ends up getting drafted by the Thunder and pick 24, I believe it was. So pick 24 comes over, earns himself rotation minutes early on, even though he took a gap year where he didn't play basketball. And I feel like from the regular season last year to the bubble, we saw Darius Baisley make a jump. We saw him come into the bubble way better than what he was during the regular season. And then so far in these first two games this season, it seems like, again, he's taken a jump from the bubble to now. He's the prototypical guy that the NBA is building around right now. A 6'9" wing / power forward who can handle the ball, who can dribble, pass, drive, shoot, defend, kind of this jack of all trades kind of guy. Um, it's hard to find a good comp for him. I flirted the other day with the idea of, is Darius Baisley's ceiling like a Portland era Nick Batum, right? A guy that can go out and flirt with a triple double every night. He kind of has that same style of build, that same defensive profile. So if I had to say there's like a second guy after Shai, it's probably Darius Baisley. After that, you start to get into, I mean, everybody has a price, right? I mean, for this team, I think even Shai has a price.
Yeah.
Will anybody ever reach the selling point for their team to meet what the Thunder would want for Shai? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. But everybody has a price. But I would say those two guys are probably in like the top tier. And then next tier down, you're looking at your Lou Dorts, your Teo Maladones, your Alexei Pokushevskis. Those two younger ones, Teo and Poku, primarily because you don't know what you have in those guys yet. They're so young. You don't know what they could be. They're just pure potential at this point. And so you don't want to, especially as a rebuilding team, you don't want to sell off on potential. But then after that, I think everyone else is pretty much free game. They're not in the long-term plans. Even a guy like Hamidou Diallo, I know that the team likes Hami as far as his work ethic, his drive, his mindset. But if a deal comes along where they have to throw Hamidou Diallo in for salary filler, or throw Hamidou Diallo in to get the extra asset, I don't think they're going to think twice about anything like that. I think almost everybody on this team is pretty expendable. except for probably Shai being number 1, Baisley being number 2, and then that second tier being Lou, Teo, and Poku.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can relate to the thing about Diallo. I'm a Heat fan, and I feel like the Heat always have these like last couple of years we've always had these like 14th, 15th men who you'll always see these pressers with Spoelstra where they talk about how they're such a hard worker, they're a great practice player, but we end up shipping them off, or they don't end up making the rotation, or they get to the G League or something. Um, but yeah, I think Baisley was really interesting last night. I think he hit a couple threes. He had this one really nice block down the stretch. I think it was in the fourth quarter where it was kind of a chase down, but not really because he just kind of used his insane length to like go from like the free throw line to blocking the layup. I forget who it was. It might have been Clarkson he was blocking. Um, I can see the Batum um, comps there. With this team, we're talking so much about the young guys, um, and we've talked about like Horford and George Hill, what they bring. Do you think those guys? I know you said you could see the Chris Paul path for Horford this year, but do you think those guys are definitely staying the year in OKC, or could we see them being flipped for more assets?
Yes. So on the Horford front again, just his contract is difficult to move because it's so large. I've already kind of been looking into like what teams could use an Al Horford type player, and it's just hard to make salaries work. The smoothest move for Al Horford is simply just sending him back to Boston in that traded player exception they got for
Hmm.
Gordon Hayward. That fits perfectly, and then the Thunder take an asset and are on their way, shave off all that money off their cap. I think Horford is going to end up being one of those guys that goes into next summer and gets traded around the draft. That would be my assumption. I think there's got to be some suitors for George Hill though, and I do not expect George Hill to be on this team for the remainder of the season. One interesting one that's already come up is with the injury to Spencer Dinwiddie.
Hmm.
Can you
Hmm.
send George Hill to the Brooklyn Nets? He, as far as a role player, a spot up 3-point shooter, a defender, he slides in there damn near perfectly. And so, are the Knicks, sorry, the Nets a candidate for George Hill? A team like the Clippers could use a guy like George Hill, although the Thunder already own all the Clippers' future assets anyways. So I don't know what they would give Oklahoma City for him. I would see George Hill getting moved this season, maybe sooner rather than later. And then one guy that I think the league just kind of forgets about because he just hasn't been seen in a while. Trevor Ariza is on
Hmm.
this roster. He didn't come to camp. It's basically an Andre Iguodala with Memphis situation
Hmm.
where he's just waiting to get traded. But can the Thunder ship him off somewhere and get a second round pick, whatever for him? So I definitely think there's still some moves to be made. Hell, I mean, even Mike Muscala has looked incredibly good in the preseason and the two early regular season games of this year. Is he a guy that you can ship off and possibly get a light asset for in return? Just because we're in the season now doesn't mean that this Thunder team still isn't looking and in asset collection mode. I think they are still at that point. They're looking to collect as many draft picks as possible. They're not going to stop until they have all picks number 1 through 60 in a draft. I'm convinced of it. They just want the draft lottery, just to be 14 names of Oklahoma City Thunder over and over and over again. But yeah, so I definitely think Hill could be gone this season before the trade deadline. I think Horford probably goes into next summer. And then I think you can see guys like Muscala and Ariza getting moved as well.
It's funny you mentioned George Hill. I feel like we talked about Darius Bazley being kind of like one of those players the NBA is building around. Like George Hill has a skill set that I feel like a lot of contenders could talk themselves into too. Just like you look at teams like the Clippers relying on Reggie Jackson, and it's the Heat not really starting a pure point guard most of their games, or at least in their 2 or 3 games they've played so far. Like there are teams that could use George Hill minutes on their squad.
Yeah, definitely. He's absolutely knockdown shooter. Great defensive player, great locker room guy. I mean, he was one of the leaders on that Milwaukee Bucks team last year, especially whenever they decided to boycott that game. You know, he was the one that was kind of outspoken and standing up for that. He's a consummate professional. Everything he's said since he's been in Oklahoma City, I think he's already winning over some Oklahoma City Thunder fans just because he's, you know, we compete to win. We want to win for these fans. He says all the right stuff. Just a consummate professional. Yeah, I think he is, and later in his career, I think he is one of these guys that 100%, you hit the nail on the head. This is one of the guys that contending teams want on their roster. And he's got a really tradable salary. He's only making 9.5 million, right? So it's really easy for other teams to match that. He's non-guaranteed next year. I think he's only promised like 2 million next year. If you waive him by maybe by the draft or something like that. So he's definitely a player that I think contenders are going to start calling Oklahoma City on.
So yeah, we've talked a lot about the asset collection mode that the Thunder have sort of transitioned into. Just kind of curious on your thoughts as like a Thunder fan as you kind of enter this new phase of the team. Do you want to, be the process Sixers, or do you want to do this like kind of sort of asset collection where you're still competitive? Like what do you want to see as a fan?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people have originally looked at this Thunder rebuild kind of like the process Sixers. The difference, though, is, I mean, the process Sixers were, starting guys that shouldn't have never been in the league, where the Thunder are starting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Darius Baisley and Lou Dort. They already have this nice base. To me, it's more comparable to the Boston rebuild whenever they traded all their vets to Brooklyn, got all the assets, but then we're still a little competitive. That's kind of how I see this rebuild taking shape, albeit the Thunder have all these draft picks. They have picks from Houston, which those picks are starting to look pretty nice, those future Houston picks. They have picks from the Clippers. They have picks from Miami. They have picks from Philadelphia. They have picks from all over the place. The Thunder can't control where those picks are going to land, right? That's in those teams' ballpark. The only picks the Thunder can control are their own. And the best way to control your own pick and to get the best pick is to lose. So I don't think they want to stay competitive in the sense that they're pushing for the playoffs or they're pushing for that play-in tournament. Because, I mean, how many teams have we seen that perpetually live in that drafting 6, 7, 8, 9 and have stayed in basketball mediocrity for forever? The Sacramento Kings, up until this year, the Phoenix Suns. The Thunder don't want to be that. So I think their best path forward, have these young promising guys, but besides that, just bottom out. Like, be bad, collect a top 5 pick this year in this loaded 2021 class. I mean, this tank might only last 2 years if they're lucky, right? If the Thunder can luck out and get like pick number 1 this year and draft a Cade Cunningham, and then the Thunder actually have possibly 3 first-round picks coming their way in 2021. They have the best 2 out of their own, Houston's and Miami's. It's looking like it's going to be Oklahoma City's and Houston's picks that they'll get there. They also get the Golden State pick if it falls between 21 and 30. Not banking on that one right now, seeing how Golden State's played. Yeah. But let's say Houston trades James Harden and ends up getting the number 10 pick in the draft, and the Thunder get the number 3 pick in the draft. You have 2 top 10 picks in 2021, plus a million other picks. What does it cost to move up to number 1?
Oh, yeah.
Does it cost pick 3 plus 5 picks? Okay, the Thunder still have 20 left over after that point. What does it cost to move up from 10 to 5? Does it cost 10 Alexei Pokashevsky and 2 other picks? Yeah. Okay, you'll trade that for an Evan Mobley or a Jalen Suggs, And so the Thunder have built themselves up to where if they can just bottom themselves out and get a top 5 pick in like the next 2 years, all the other assets they have, they can go out and get whatever they want. And I don't think they're going to trade those assets for an established player. Thunder fans are obsessed with the name Bradley Beal. Not going to happen. They don't want a guy that's in his late 20s. They don't want a guy that's not on a team-friendly contract, that's not team-controlled. they're going to trade these picks for better picks.
Mhm.
If you remember, Sam Presti in back-to-back years drafted Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden. I don't think he's going to repeat that and draft 3 Hall of Famers in back-to-back years again. Although if he does, God bless that man. But this is the way they're going to build. They're going to make draft picks. They're going to make advantageous trades, and they're going to look to bottom out so their own picks are as valuable as they can be, and try to jumpstart this rebuild with a couple of blue chip prospects in the 2021 and 2022 draft classes.
It's interesting. I feel like you mentioned it a little bit there, but like the Thunder can effectively look at like whatever picks or players are out there and say name your price to just about any team with as far as like draft picks go, because they have the picks to match it most of the
definitely.
time.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in our podcast. Like, again, if you get pick number 3, how much does it cost to get to number 1?
Oh yeah.
Do you want 6 picks? Do you want 7? Do you want 8? You know, there is a price. It's just, is the Thunder willing to pay it? You know,
Yeah.
What do they perceive as the difference between Cade Cunningham and Jonathan Kuminga? You know, is the jump there big enough for them to cash in those picks? And it's also an interesting aspect on these future draft picks that they have are almost like stocks, right? Yeah. You have to know when to keep them and when to sell them. When is it at its highest value? Those Houston picks look really, really good right now because it looks like Houston's going to crumble and fall apart. Are those Houston picks at their most valuable right now? Are they at their most valuable right after James Harden gets traded? Are they at their most valuable on draft night? And so that's a position that I do not envy for Sam Presti to have to figure out at what point are these assets at their highest value point. But I do not doubt for a second that he will capitalize when they are and make those moves to move up in drafts and get the guys that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, even I think the case we actually compared it to on our season preview was like they're gonna have enough picks to be in that like mid 2010s Boston situation where it's like anytime player X is available, the list of teams that could hypothetically trade, it's like this team. Oh, and yeah, the Thunder have like enough assets where they could get into the conversation.
Definitely.
It's just a matter of choosing what they want to spend them on, really.
Exactly. And for a small market team like the Thunder, I think if they were to trade for like an existing player, they're looking at guys that are still on their rookie scale contracts who still have restricted free agency coming up. You know, the best free agent signing the Oklahoma City Thunder have ever made is Nerlens Noel, right? They don't exist in free agency. They don't go out and typically trade for these guys that aren't on team controlled contracts because that's just the life of a small market team. Yeah. You have to build through the draft and you have to build through trades, you know, because you're not going out and recruiting these big name free agents to come play in your city. So a guy like Shai, right? They get him going into his second year. When Shai hits restricted free agency, you better bet that the Thunder are dropping that 5-year extension on him. That way they can keep him for 8 or 9 years before they even have to start thinking about, is he going to leave in free agency? That's the way this team is going to build. That's the way they always have built. They just now have tons of bullets in the clip to make that type of thing happen.
I think it's really important, too, that you mentioned just like the life of a small market team, because I feel like when we talk about these things, like whether it's a team doing a rebuild or a player getting traded or extensions, I feel like a lot of the time we look at it from like the perspective of somebody that played a bunch of NBA 2K franchise. And it's like, all right, yeah, you know what? Like, we got it. We traded for a young player. We're going to, you know, sign some dudes in free agency. We're going to have a starting lineup that makes the playoffs next year. And there's just different realities and some different calculus that goes into building when you're in a smaller market. And so I think with that in mind, like it becomes a lot more important to sort of build through the draft and be comfortable with this taking some time.
Totally. I mean, the Thunder aren't in Beach, right? They're not in Los Angeles. The Lakers, you know, God bless them, they sucked for a long time. And then LeBron James said, I want to come to LA, and everything changes. That's never happening in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City next summer has a metric crap ton of cap space. Like they're going to be maybe the most cap spaced team in the league next summer. And they're not going to sign any impactful free agents. What they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, you have that player making $30 million. You have Gordon Hayward that's not working out because you decided to pay him $31 million. and he's got 3 years left on his contract, trade him to us into our cap space for nothing in return and give us a couple first round picks for the trouble. You know, you have that Al Horford contract, Philly, that you don't want. Trade him to Oklahoma City. We'll absorb 15 into that. Give us a first round pick for our troubles. This is prototypical what small market franchises do. The cap space for the Thunder is a tool to collect more assets and to collect the junk that other people don't want and get paid for it, not to actually like go out and get free agents. And again, that's just the life of a small market team. But I feel like the Thunder have maybe the best GM for a small market team that they could possibly ask for.
Yeah, and like to be fair, also like I said it before, I root for the Knicks. Like playing that sort of we have cap space and we're going to be in contention for free agents game, kind of a crapshoot a lot of the time. Like there's a chance you wind up with nobody. So like if you have all these picks and you say we're going to stay in the draft, we're going to get the players that we actually want and we'll have some franchise control on, like you're guaranteeing you'll have your guys in the building.
Exactly. Exactly.
Earlier you mentioned something about like kind of looking at across the league for trades with guys that are like kind of in that restricted, still like, a couple years until their restricted free agency comes up in their rookie contracts. Is there anyone in like particular you think the Thunder could be looking at in that realm?
Oh, it's so hard to say. The Thunder they've kind of developed this reputation of a team that takes on former lottery picks that have kind of fallen out of favor and turns them into something. They first did it with Enes Kanter. They then did it with Dion Waiters. They then did it with Nerlens Noel, right? They take on these guys that have kind of fallen out of favor. One team that I kind of look at where maybe this becomes a reality, the Atlanta Hawks just went out and signed like 15 people on free agency and pushed all of their young wings kind of farther down the pecking order. So do one of those young wings in Atlanta possibly become available moving forward, like a Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter type of player? We've been talking about the Knicks. I don't know if the Thunder want to trade for a guy that's about to go into restricted free agency, but a Frank Ntilikina. We talked about Kevin Knox earlier, a Kevin Knox type of player. Guys like that, I think, are people that they would look for. Guys that were top 10 picks that just haven't panned out, that the Thunder still believe in and still want to go out and take a shot on. Last year I flirted around with the idea of like a Dragon Bender. He seemed kind of like a candidate of a guy that the Thunder might try to target, buy low, and see if you can rebuild the value of that player. So I think guys like that. Besides that, I mean, the thing with those players is just like how the Thunder see them, every other team in the league sees a young, promising player that is on a team controlled contract moving forward. So it's really hard to pry those guys away from the teams they're currently on, unless they, number one, they demand a trade, or number two, there's just something fundamentally wrong. They're either a massive locker room problem, like a Kevin Porter Jr. up in Cleveland, or something like that. So it's really hard to get your hands on those types of guys. But the Thunder tend to scour the league and try to find those ones that have kind of fallen out of favor and see if they can get them at a reduced price and then rebuild the image.
No, I mean, it seems like a smart strategy. And even if you want to touch on what we were talking about earlier with just teams not playing those young dudes because they're focused on having to win now, like the Hawks look like a team that wants to contend right away. So like someone like a Reddish, or I think Herter's still getting rotation minutes for them, but they've got young dudes that are kind of going to be starved for minutes a bit.
Yeah,
exactly. And do the Hawks, and this is the thing that I think some people are worried about with the Thunder, because the process Sixers didn't even technically go all the way through with tanking. I don't want to crap on the Hawks, but I'm about to crap on the Hawks. They went out and signed these guys, right? They got a Danilo Gallinari. They got a Bogdan Bogdanovic. They got a Rajon Rondo. And where's that going to get them? The 6th seed? The 7th seed? Maybe 6 or 7 games in the first round. Whereas if they would have bottomed out, they could have went out and got the Jalen Green or the Jonathan Kuminga or the Evan Mobley. They're ownership decided we don't want to tank anymore.
Yeah.
We want to compete now. And that is so when you want to compete now, you go out and you sign a bunch of mid-tier free agents.
Yeah.
And you end up back in mediocrity again. I don't think the Thunder are going to do that. I think the Thunder are fully invested. Their ownership group is fully invested. And those are the types of teams that you can prey on, though. Those teams that say, we've been here for 3 or 4 or 5 years. We don't like this anymore.
Yeah.
Go make the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Kings are a perfect example of this, right? The Kings have sucked for forever. At some point, that front office is going to say, well, they already have said go sign free agents and they still suck, but
Yeah.
go get some guys that can get us to the playoffs. And the Thunder can say, oh, okay, we'll give you George Hill and Al Horford. All you have to do is hand over Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah.
All you have to do is hand over, they're not going to hand over De'Aaron Fox, but somebody of that level, right?
Yeah.
And we can help you make the playoffs. You can be the 7th seed. We don't care.
Yeah.
We want your young talent because we're fully invested in the long-term outlook.
It is funny to be looking at teams and owners being like, yeah, no, we want that first game, like that first round series against the Nuggets or the Nets or just like a team that's going to run us off the court more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
I mean,
talk about small markets, like it's understandable sometimes to be that tired.
Yeah. Well, and in a normal non-COVID year, you get at least those 2 playoff home games, which is a lot of revenue.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
A lot of owners right now struggling with revenue during the economic hardships that that makes a little bit of sense. And again, I feel like the Thunder are primed to prey on those types of teams.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah,
think one word on those Hawks signings is it's always a good sign when like Dave and I are texting about them when they get announced, and it's like, did they sign these guys to trade them, or are they really trying to contend? Like, it's good to see these signings where you don't exactly know what the motivation was.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
yeah, I mean, and the big question with the Hawks obviously is the whole like signing multiple people that play the same position as John Collins, which is just
exactly. They have a ton of guys that can play that 4 position and a ton of point guards and guys that can handle the ball. So,
yeah, they seem.
I always say though, sign the same position as your best players you already have. Like, that's just team building 101.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you kind of brought up the Boston. We both have brought up the Boston example earlier as like might be more similar to that Boston kind of rebuild. But obviously, the main part that has made that Boston rebuild work so well was they drafted well. Brown and Tatum took big steps, and that sort of leads me to asking like, so we all love Shai, but what do you think he needs to do to kind of get to that next level, to be on that like echelon of like young guys that people like Tatum, people like Brandon Ingram, like that, those future all-star 23 and under guys?
Yeah, for sure. So the good thing about Shai is he's so versatile, right? Last season, he played more minutes at the 3 than he did at any other position per Basketball Reference. This season, he's the starting point guard, right? And he has the ball in his hands every possession. He can play on ball, he can play off ball. I think that makes team building with him so much easier because if you get the number 2 pick in the 2021 draft, you don't have to say, oh, Shai's our point guard, so we can't take Cade or Jalen. Like, you just go take the best player available because Shai can fit wherever. With that being said, I think the places where Shai can really grow, and we've already started to see it a little bit this season, these 2 games. Number 1 is defensively. He has, you guys have mentioned it, he has the defensive tools, right? He's 6'6" with a nearly 7-foot wingspan. He's super quick. He has the tools to develop into a good defender. He's put on a lot of muscle from last season to this season. Now he's got to put it into practice, though, right? It's one thing to have the potential. It's the other thing to take that potential and realize it. Last year, I feel like Shai took a lot of defensive possessions off. There were games where he was matched up against someone like Russell Westbrook and just got completely bullied down low. So I think defensively is the first step forward for Shai. After that, we've never really got to see him play a ton with the ball in his hands and be the primary facilitator. Last year they had Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder to do that. Whenever he was in Los Angeles with the Clippers, he had other guys to do that because he was a rookie. So this is the first year he's really getting that opportunity. And I think that that's another place where he can grow is how he play makes for others. And I think spending that year with Chris Paul last year is going to be so fundamental for Shai's career. There's already plays that I see him making, like in the bubble and now in this regular season, where I watch him and I say, he got that from Chris.
Mhm.
Right. Whenever he comes off a screen on the pick and roll, and instead of looking at the man in front of him, he's reading that backline help defense to decide, am I going to the roller or am I kicking this out to the corner? Like that is a read that Chris Paul has taught him. And you can see the wheels turning. I think in 3 to 4 years from now, we're going to talk about Shai and say, man, that season with Chris Paul was maybe the most impactful thing he ever had in his career. So playmaking, defense, and then his off the dribble three. He hasn't made them much so far in these first 2 games, small sample size. But last year we saw him make a ton of like spot up threes, some off the dribble threes. If he can get that off the dribble three really going, he's already started to raise his release point a little bit. He had been releasing from like around his chest or his chin. He's starting to release a little bit higher now. If he could become a knockdown shooter off the dribble, that way people cannot go under the screen on him, that opens up everything else for his game. And I think that's when he starts to get to be a really, really scary type of player. He has all the tools. I think he's a guy that can make multiple all-star appearances in his career. The physical tools, the quickness, the IQ, I think it's all there. It's just a matter of him getting these reps and these opportunities as the guy on the team to really start to put that stuff together. Once he does, though, I think he's really going to be that guy. I actually made a prediction this year that he's going to be a 25, 5-5 guy, which last season there was only 5 of those in the league. They're all known on a single name basis, right? Russ, Harden, Giannis, LeBron, and Luka. I think Shai could join that echelon. The difference is those 5 guys did it for winning teams. Shai's going to do it for a tanking team.
Right.
But I think he can make the jump into that echelon. And if he does, you are talking about a fundamental piece. Maybe he's not the number 1 guy on a finals contending team. Maybe he's the number 2 guy. But you've got enough draft assets to go get that number 1 guy. Is that number 1 guy Cade Cunningham? Right? If it is, go get him. But I think Shai, defense, passing, and his off the dribble three are the 3 places where if he can really make jumps in those areas, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, especially defensively. Like, we keep bringing it up, but I feel like the tools are there for him to be really, really elite defensive point guard. Maybe he doesn't have like the kind of center of gravity and like that like someone like Dort has, but like a team of the future with a Shai improved defender and a Dort next to him in the backcourt's got to be like probably one of the best defensive backcourts in the league.
Definitely. Shai has the build of like a DeJounte Murray, who is an elite point guard defender, right? And you see flashes from Shai. Last night, he had a play. He blocked a Bojan Bogdanovic corner 3-pointer. How often do you see a corner 3 getting blocked? I mean, his reaction time, his ability to block shots. He gets hung up on screens, but he has this ability to like get back into the play and block shots. Those long arms. There was a play last night. I think it was Ingles, where he just straight up picked his pocket and went down for a dunk because his arms are so long. He just reached around him and poked the ball out. He has these tools, like you said. It's just realizing the potential of that stuff, right? Putting it into practice and not just in theory.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like potential is probably a good, as we start winding this down, that's probably a good like center word for this Thunder team. I feel like they have a lot of pieces going forward that are going to look good in a few years. And as you said, they seem comfortable to be taking the time with it. They seem comfortable kind of sucking for a little bit if that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think for them, their viewpoint is we're getting young guys experience.
Right.
We're putting them in opportunities to grow. That was their big theme in their preseason and in their discussions with the media was growth, right? Each game, each practice, each loss, each win is a learning opportunity. And we want to take those experiences, we want to build on them, and we want to come back the next day better than we were the day before and keep progressing forwards. And there's growing bumps. Growth is not linear. It's
Yeah.
up and down, right? It's not perfect and pretty. But as long as and I've been preaching this especially for the two rookies, I don't care what they look like in December. I
Yeah.
care when we get to May, can we look back to December and say, man, these kids made a jump. They got so much better than what they were. That's the goal of this team this season, is to see the progression of these young guys and then get a really good draft pick.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically all we had. Dave, do you have anything else?
I just had a, you can just talk on him quickly. Just curious about the new coach, what your first impressions of him are. I know he was an assistant there for a while, right?
Yeah. So actually, he came from the University of Florida before Billy Donovan came to Oklahoma City. Sam Presti actually poached him from Florida, from Billy Donovan's staff. He came over as a player development guy, became the head coach of the Thunder's G League affiliate, was the head coach there for 3 or 4 years. Then last year made the jump from the G League up to on the bench with the Thunder. And then this year to the head coach. He's been a guy that they've been grooming for a while now. He's been in the system. He's the kind of guy they like, and they've been prepping him for something like this.
Mhm.
And so this is just kind of a natural progression for him. You listen to him talk, and he sounds exactly like Sam Presti. He's a little long-winded, uses a lot of big words, and is very big on culture, growth, and development, which is straight up with what this team is all about right now. So far, what we've seen has been pretty impressive, right? They're competing. The ball is moving quite a bit. They're finding their correct shot. That's I think one of their main focal points this year is to hell with the counting stats. It doesn't matter if you get 1 assist or 5 assists or 10 assists. We want to find the best shot on the court. I think last night Shai had like 3 or 4 hockey assists and like 4 or 5 potential assists, but they're making the right basketball plays, right? They look like a team, not like a whole bunch of guys out there looking to get their own. And then defensively, they've been playing really well. So far, I've been very impressed. Again, small sample size. It's 2 games and not 2 of high stake games, right? It's just two games for a tanking team. So
Yeah.
what can you really extrapolate? But he's a guy that they've groomed for a long time to assume this position. And they're not paying him a lot, but I think the front office sees the coach how they see the players. They want to see growth and development and let him grow into taking on bigger and bigger roles, and eventually being the coach of premier playoff team. They see him the same way that they see Poku and Teo and Shai, right? You don't have to do it all right now. We just want to see
Yeah.
you grow in the process.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know he had like been kind of like in the system for so long.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I have anything else. Tom, do you have anything else?
No, not really. Jacob, we want to thank you for taking the time to do this. We said it on one of our earlier episodes. Like it's really nice having people who've kind of been at this for a while, getting a DM on Twitter from one of us and taking the time out of their days to help us out. So thank you for that. Do you want to take a minute to plug your stuff, tell people where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. And, anytime you guys DM and ask me to talk basketball, it's hard to say no. So I'm a basketball junkie. But yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Jacob Kniffen. And my podcast, it's just a Thunder-centered podcast. It's called The Uncontested. You can find it anywhere you download podcasts. And our podcast is also on Twitter at @the_uncontested. So if you're interested in listening to us gush about Shai and Lou for hours on end, feel free to check it out.
All right, great. Thank you so much, man.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks.
guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Jacob.